Yo, what is up guys? Snap here. Today we're going to be doing a retrospective on the Secrets of the Atlas group push that we did at the start of the league. Going to be going over all of the strategies that we did and all of the builds and just a couple of my opinions of the current game state. So first, let's kind of start off with the strategy that we landed on and kind of how our progression went early on. So for starters, it's important to mention that we have an 11-man team playing with us this time. We have 6 players that are in the maps, obviously. We have a 7th person farming ritual vessels for us, which I'll get to a little bit later. Then we also have 3 traders that are assisting in selling all of the items, buying us map supplies, rolling us maps, etc. And while yes, we are dropping a lot of stuff in these maps, it's important to remember how to do division. All of the drops you're seeing here are being split 11 ways. So, you know, if you drop a divine, it's like you're dropping, I don't know, 20 chaos or 15 chaos even. So yeah, it's important to contextualize a little bit, you know, kind of what you're seeing on screen here. So let's go over quickly what the strategy was, kind of what our maps looked like, and you know, what we were able to run by the end here. If you're unaware, we were doing a exile smuggling or downloading strategy that involved ritual vessels. Now, it's important to understand that ritual is kind of dog shit. If you're unaware, there are huge penalties to monsters that are respawned and revived in the ritual. You can see here on the game constants page on POEDB, there is a 40% less IIQ and IIR, as well as another repeat less IIQ that happens for each respawn. So there are massive penalties applied to monsters that you keep respawning through the rituals. Now, there is one small loophole, however. If you place a giant exile into a ritual vessel and you kill that first giant exile and it splits into smaller exiles, the resulting smaller exiles are no longer ritual tagged. We know this because the loot starts to drop immediately. If they were a part of the ritual, all of the loot would be collected and dropped at the end. However, because the loot is spawning immediately, we know for certain that these monsters aren't ritual tags and therefore, by logical extension, aren't being affected by the huge less IIQ and IIR multipliers that ritual monsters are subject to. This means you can get a ton of unique monsters in your map that have very little penalty, and you can respawn them over and over again with ritual to just create a ton of monsters. This, of course, is very powerful when you include stuff like Titanic, Glittering, you know, yada yada, all of those good scarabs that have been good in the Settlers League. So we're going to be using 2 ritual vessels jam full of gigantic exiles, and then we're using 3 additional scarabs on top of that, which is Titanic, Legend, Glittering. There are a couple options here if you're solo. I think Wisps are a very viable option, you know, if you don't want to go the Glittering route, but I think in large parties, Glittering is going to be the best bang for your buck because uniques are worth so much and Wisp does not scale in party at all. The maps look something like this. We were going for 8 modded maps. We were using a variety of the Maven chisels. We tried pack size, we tried rarity chisels, you know, normal chisels. You can kind of just use whatever's cheapest, honestly, and then vol it for 8 mods. You want to be able to run the hardest maps you can. You know, this one is a very good baseline, like 65 pack size with like 150 quant and rarity. This is a very, very good map that we would be able to run. These maps can get way crazier than what I'm showing you here. I've seen 250 quant and rarity with like 70 pack size with runnable mods, and the 6-man builds this time around were so powerful we're able to run complete bullshit mods like, you know, minus max, penetration with volatile cores, you know, the whole 9 yards. We can run a lot. Now, of course, there is a second component of this strategy, which is collecting and bottling the exiles. I'll leave a link to this video in the description here, which is just a quick demo about how to do it, but essentially all you do is put as many exiles on your map with Ruckus. You run 1 partnership, 2 gigantification, you know, rest anarchy scarabs. You run up to each ritual, eyeball how many rogue exiles are inside of the ritual. If there's a lot, you bottle it up. If there's none, you just simply move on. Ideally, you're looking for like 3 minimum. 4 is maybe somewhat inconsistent. Anything higher than 4 is just honestly a big bonus. But a lot of them that you're going to be running are probably going to be 3 giants. I think that's probably where your baseline is going to be. Once again, the scarabs for those is going to be 1 partnership, 2 gigantifications, and 2 anarchy scarabs here. Craft anarchy on the map device, and your atlas looks a little something like this. The only thing you care about is grabbing all of the Ruckus nodes up here. Obviously, you don't want exiled wool because you don't want them to be ghosted, and you do not want to grab rogue trader here because they're going to have a ton more life. They're harder to kill. Then you just grab ritual chance on the tree. You have a chance to dupe him here. That's basically it. It's 55 points. There's really nothing much you care about on the atlas here when you're bottling exiles. As for the main juicing atlas tree, it looks something like this. It's a standard map effect tree. Grab all the map effect here, up here, map effect at the top, and then you grab the quant ring in the middle, and then the rest of your points are just like whatever, honestly. You do need to get deli mirror here because you don't have a source of deli on the map, so the nodes here to guarantee the mirror are important. Then the rest of your points, we just decided to throw it into Beyond just for a little bit of extra tainted currency, but honestly, it doesn't matter. One interesting thing we did this league was to take Wellspring of Creation. If you're playing an armor stacker with the proper comp, damage is just pretty much infinite, but tankiness comes at a premium, and so clicking this node to make the monsters more tanky, but you take less damage as well is, I think, very well worth clicking, in my opinion, if you don't have any damage problems. This lets you run extremely rippy combos of maps that you wouldn't normally be able to run, including stuff like volatile cores in group. It's just very, very easy to tank that kind of stuff when you're taking 25% less damage right off the rip. You combine this with stuff like Soul Link and Fortify, Max Res, it's very, very easy to basically tank anything in the entire game. If you're curious, Empy did a little write-up here that went over all of the splits, what we're paying all the traders. It's a very good read if you want to go, look at kind of what roughly we're making in a group. But the grand total is, after all of that mapping and all of that, we're making 12.2 div an hour for the 6-man. And some other fun facts is we dropped 18 headhunters, 14 mage bloods, 2 fishing rods, and we also did indeed drop a mirror this league. So with all of that prep, the 10-man team, the whole 9 yards, dedicated farmers and traders running 24/7, we're making a grand total of 12.2 divs an hour. Hashtag GOG was right. One thing I want to mention, however, that I thought was very amusing was that selling shovels instead of actually running the strat is a much more profitable endeavor. I had a couple friends in my Discord look at the price of these vessels in TFT, and they said that is just ridiculous, and they went and farmed them a bit themselves, and turns out farming vessels and filling them with gigantics is somewhere in the realm of 60 to maybe even like 100 divines per hour, just bottling exiles with no atlas and just selling them on TFT. Currently, with the price of vessels, this is by far the best strategy in the entire game. You can run 10 minutes of vessels and make 20 divines. The prices out there are just ludicrous. So the moral of the story is, don't actually map, just sell shovels instead. But yeah, all the people in my Discord jumped in and they just started flooding the exile market, and they're all making hundreds of divs. So get in while you can. Anyways, that's enough about the strategies and stuff like that. I want to quickly talk about some learnings about the builds that we, have refined over the past couple weeks here, and some tips and tricks you can apply if you're looking to do a larger party like we are. So first off, talking about the carry, our skill choice landed on Smite of Divine Judgment. Now, there's a few reasons for this. I think right now in the armor stacker meta, you have 2 viable skill choices. One of them is going to still, unfortunately, just be Lightning Strike. The downside to Lightning Strike is that you do need to fit in a Nimbus for it to be worth it. And if you are fitting in a Nimbus, it's very hard to cap out your Enmity's Embrace because you no longer have another rare ring here. That will chop down the build to just 1 rare, which is a little bit tight to get everything, rest capped and comfy and your life pool to, look okay. So we ended up going Smite because we don't have to be constrained to wearing a Nimbus here. This new ring, Enmity's Embrace, is just straight up best in slot for any large parties. You get so much resistances from banners, from supports, from war cries, from the Crybot, of course, auras from your aura bot, purity of elements from your other supports. There's just 12 different things among the party comp that's just giving you a ton of max res. It's very, very easy to cap out on the fire res here. The thing about Smite of Divine Judgment here is that it is a very good skill that has a lot of quality of life. It's just that the damage isn't that high. However, the damage can definitely be overcome if you have a proper pyroclast setup. Essentially, anything in the game does melt when you're tossing out the pyroclast mines, no matter what skill you're using. Smite just has really good quality of life with a very far strike range. It's very good at clearing the trash. And since we're stationary in a ritual, and that's the majority of the hard content, is just the giant exiles that are coming out of the ritual, we're always going to have pretty high uptime on mines there, and so the lack of damage here isn't really a big concern for us. We did end up dropping Blood-Soaked Blade in order to run a mana tincture. We find that Blood-Soaked Blade is very dangerous in high-end juice because when you start teetering on the edge of having your stacks, eat into your life regen or life recovery, you can very easily die to stuff like dots or just like a bunch of damage because your recovering is constantly being eaten away by the stacks here. So while it's harder to sustain this on mana, or the uptime isn't as good, it's way more safe. And honestly, we don't really need the damage with Pyroclast being in the game. Additionally, to help sustain the mana cost of the massive attack speed per second that we have, we did need to take an instant leech mastery here. So something that wasn't included in the original POB, but we were having some pretty bad mana problems, and the 5% of leech here is instant, helps a ton with the mana costs. The rest of the gear is pretty much as we had planned prior to the league. There aren't any other huge adjustments on the carry here. Next up, I want to talk about the Orabot here and a couple of the changes and adjustments I've made since the pre-league POBs. So one thing you might notice on my character is that I didn't have a single damage aura activated. I think it is way more important for you to empower the defensive auras, including Disc, Determination, and Grace, if you have the extra mana or RMR, than it is to run a flat damage aura. I think it's just way too hard to fit in a flat damage aura here. If you can be bothered, you can run a Guardian's Blessing with either a Marionette or a Summon Holy Relic, but the rituals are so laggy, the uptime on that is going to be iffy, but if you need a little bit of extra trash clear, you can consider running the Blessing. One thing I introduced was a Vol Cyclone here. If you're running rituals with the Legend Scarab, a lot of the exiles are going to get procs bubbles, which are really annoying. One way you can kind of help get around this and mitigate lag a little bit is to run a Vol Cyclone and suck all the proc shields onto one spot. If you're going to do this, you need a very exceptionally tanky character, and so I went out of my way to spell suppress cap as well as spell block, and regular block cap here. Additionally, Additionally, one extra defensive layer because you are stationary with the Vol Cyclone is to put down a Frost Shield on top of your face right before you click the Vol Cyclone, and the Frost Shield will absorb a lot of that damage. Once again, a lot of the rippy stuff in the map is when you're stationary inside of the ritual, so you can pre-prep all of these stationary defenses, so you're very, very tanky when you actually do push the Vol Cyclone button to suck everything in. I did need to link this to Inspiration because this skill costs a ton of mana when it's level 23. It's 58 mana. It's a shit ton, so you do need to lower that mana cost down when linking it to Inspiration. I was also running a very high level Clarity. As I mentioned before, we were having a ton of mana problems with our War Cries, with our main skills, and we also wanted to be able to run the Tinctures for a long time, so the high level Clarity here is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I did need to switch off of Bubonics here. Unfortunately, it is impossible to stop kill stealing with Bubonics, even with Ancestral Bond. The Corpse Destruction is not counted as like self-damage, and so it's impossible to stop them from killing stuff. When you're inside the ritual, you do get pushed around a lot, and that activates the Corpse Destruction, which will explode and steal kills. So I did have to put on, just a synth pair of boots. I crafted up the ES, it gives me a lot of extra ES, and it does prevent me from kill stealing when I'm Vol Cycloning all of the stuff on top of me. The rest of it is just standard Grace stacking gear, Grace on the rings, Grace on the belt, and then obviously the body armor, Grace on the implicits. Everything else pretty standard on the tree. I did end up tattooing 2 chance to block attack damages here to cap out. I then switched both of my large clusters to Mage Hunter. It's a very good way to get spell block here. And then additionally, my cluster for aura effect was just the low passive 24% here. I need to kind of be able to tank a lot, and I am sacrificing a little bit of aura effect on the team to be able to suck all of the stuff on top of me in the ritual and feel safe. So I need to go very, very defensive on this aura bot. Additionally, this tattoo here doesn't import, but it is a 40% increased global defenses tattoo. You see these tattoos in a mastery that doesn't make sense, it's more than likely going to be somebody tattooing it off for global defenses, so just keep that in mind. Anyways, let's move on to the Crybot here. Crybot had one main adjustment here made to the build, and that is, of course, the introduction of banners. You need to click 2 banner wheels, one of them being Rallying Icon as well as Renowned Deeds. Rallying Icon gives a shit ton of LE res, something like 200% per banner you place down, which is totaling 400% with the 2 banners we're clicking, and you get a big refund on the banner by clicking the node here on Champion. It's just very, very free. Additionally, the banners are giving you capped attack block, a giant like 600 life on block. Defiance is spell suppress, capping you if you're not able to spell suppress cap on your own. It's also removing a gigantic portion of spell damage that you suppress on top of giving you the suppression cap. And so in the rituals, when they're very, very dangerous content, right as you start the ritual, place down both of your max valor banners. These things do a ton of heavy lifting as a defensive layer in the ritual, so definitely look to incorporate these if you're running a Crybot. Crybot was also running a low level anger just for a little bit of extra flat damage for the carry when we're running around and clearing trash. And then it's just a standard Crybot tree. And then you path over to Frenzy Charges, grab the Frenzy Charge Anoint over here, equip Replica Badge for max Frenzy Charges, convert it to Fortify. It's very, very good. It's kind of really the only adjustment here we made on the Crybot was just implementing those banners. They are very, very, very powerful. Now, moving on to the Mana Guardian, we did have to make some changes here because normally the Mana Guardian is just really tanky and doesn't really have to care about his personal defenses, but we were trying to run some crazy fucking map mods and some really dangerous rituals, and the rest of the party is taking a lot of damage, and if he's soul linking, the Mana Guardian's kind of getting fucking destroyed, right? So we had to do a little bit of additional investment down here to get his ES pool up to where it needed to be. One of the things you can do here is put your Healthy Mind in the bottom of the Scion socket, and then put a Light of Meaning in the left side, as well as a Unnatural Instinct in the right side. This jewel alone is giving him 3,400 energy shield, which is just obviously insane. This jewel does a lot of the heavy lifting for the ES pool of the Mana Guardian and the Aura Bot. Very, very good socket to put it here in Scion. That's basically his main pool, just ton of ES, gets a ton of armor from his mana, and then he equips an Aegis. He's immortal, he doesn't care. Those are the kind of the main adjustments we did for the Mana Guardian. As for the Culler, we did switch up a few things here. We ended up also switching the Culler off of Blood-Soaked Blade. This saves him a few passive points, but in order to be able to run the Tincture on mana, it's very helpful to get a Power of Purpose keystone here in the Ranger area, or in any jewel socket you can find. We put Ellie Res on it, which does help him res cap. It's a lot less strain on the rares to get res cap. And then of course we gave him the Red Nightmare here with some tattooed fire res here to give him attack block. This is block cap without glancing blows. It's very, very powerful on the Culler. It is kind of necessary to equip a Progenesis on this character if you can afford it. As you can see, when he reserves his life pool, he only has 2,000 life, but he does have a ton of flask effect, and so using a Progenesis here will bump up his EHP pool a ton, abusing all that flask effect on Progenesis. I think it's very, very necessary on the Culler here. We also did switch up the culling links a little bit. We ended up doing Fork Return. I think it's the best coverage on Kinetic Blast, so you do Fork Return, KB, GMP, culling, rarity. Just a quick gemlink swap here that we weren't doing before. And last, let's talk about the Druggerminer hybrid character that we've been playing. We did a Thread of Hope here over to Glancing Blows just to save him a little bit of passive points here. We also did path bottom side down to Iron Reflexes and Versatile Combatant, and the reason for this is because we ended up slapping an Aegis Aurora on him. Historically, this character has struggled with personal recovery a lot, and so giving him Iron Reflexes with the Aegis as well as Versatile Combatant lets him soak a lot more damage as well as recover a ton with the Aegis effect. It's just very, very OP. We're trying to slap this on as many characters as possible these days. Additionally, make sure you're tattooing off all of your strength and or dex for life recovery here. This will increase your healing per second from all of your flasks, and you want to kind of mix them in with flask duration tattoos to get a very, very long flask duration as well. You can kind of mix and match however many tattoos. If you feel like you have enough recovery or you want more duration, just mix and match your tattoos how you see fit. Other than that, it's a pretty standard Druggerminer tree. Just grab all the flask stuff. You need one mine wheel to cap out your Pyroclast mines, and then the rest of the points are just personal defenses so that you can live. Anyways, that's basically it regarding all the strategies, all the builds, yada yada. I'm just going to be yapping a little bit about what I think of the current meta, just some general thoughts about the current game state, stuff like that. So all constructive stuff out the window. It's just ranting time at the moment. First, I want to talk a little bit about the petal maps. I think they are actually better for juicing uniques and stuff like that in comparison to juicing T17s. I think the petal abilities are so OP that they kind of make up for the fact that, you know, the T17s might have more monsters and that kind of thing, and you get fragment drops and stuff. If your character is able to handle 8 modded T16.5s, you'll be able to extract a lot more loot out of your maps. However, you just do need a very, very, very strong character to be able to do so. In particular, there are 2 petal abilities that stand out among the rest. One of them is going to be Familiarity, the thing that converts all items to a single base type, and then it also rolls 200% more quantity or 90% less quantity. This is very OP, especially if you're targeting certain base types. If you see in some of these clips, we're dropping like 20 Hellion's Paws, which is a T0 unique, but the reason that this is happening is because Hellion's Paw is the only eligible unique on this base. This can happen for a lot of uniques, and single base items, you know, that are able to be historically, you know, trashed to treasured or chanced. You're going to be dropping a ton of these when you're using Familiarity. The second best T16.5 ability is going to be the Rarity. That is going to be Impulsiveness. This one is very, very good, very noticeable if you get a good pop. And then in third place is going to be the Toughness, because obviously the Toughness is going to be increasing the amount of drops from the unique mobs. One thing to mention here is in regards to petal abilities is you want to try and push your petal abilities when the Giant Exile splits. The initial Giant Exile obviously is going to have that huge penalty applied to it, and so ideally you'd want to use your petal ability on the split Exiles only, but it's kind of hard to time this if you have a lot of DPS or the game is lagging really hard. I think being able to 8 mod and the petal abilities make T16.5s a very superior juicing options to T17s. If you're solo, however, that might be a different story with the cost of fragments as well as stuff like Yoke of Suffering or Darkseer. Getting one of these items, you know, getting a bunch of fragments can be very, very lucrative, especially if you're running very high IQ. But I think if you're in a big party, you're looking to go to memory maps. T16.5s are where it's at. Next up, I kind of want to talk about the state of Titanic and, you know, more largely just like kind of what juicing looks like right now. From the party player's perspective, there's just one viable thing you can do right now, and that is obviously just do Titanic with whatever unique monsters you can shove into the map. It is kind of fun in one aspect in that you do have to push your characters to be very, 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 very powerful in order to do the content, but it creates a dichotomy in which there are useful monsters and not useful monsters. And in the case of Ritual, you simply do not give a flying fuck about a single monster in the entire map except for the ones in the Ritual. The only thing you might care about is killing the Eldritch packs so that you can spawn an altar, which will then subsequently affect the mobs that are inside of your Ritual. This kind of has been the case since Kalandra, where, you know, the white mobs in your map just simply don't do shit. They don't drop loot. They don't fucking give you anything. They're just completely worthless. And you're simply just walking from loot pinata to loot pinata, you know, Titanic mob to Titanic mob, unique mob. It's just the only thing that drops loot in the entire game. I personally don't think it's super healthy right now, but it is kind of fun, you know, having like those big loot explosions. But I wish the balance of like the stuff that I'm killing in the map was just a little bit more varied, I guess. I kind of feel like with juicing the past couple years, it's just been like crutch to crutch to crutch. Like for a little while, we had div card farming with strong boxes. The 500% quantity mod on boxes was carrying for so long, right? And then that got removed and we went to ghosting. Ghosting was very, very powerful mechanic, you know, when that keystone came out, and that subsequently got nerfed and that crutch kind of got removed. And then the next crutch was introduced, which was Curation Scarabs. And now Curation Scarabs was just fucking crazy for one league, which was subsequently removed. And now we have Titanic Scarab, which is just the next crutch. And then in general, all of juicing as a whole just feels sort of dog shit unless you're doing like this very hyper specific combination information. And I think that kind of feels bad. Running through your entire map, ignoring every breach, ignoring every abyss, all of the white mobs you don't give a fuck about, just is kind of like confusing to me. And I wish there was some sort of shift in this sort of area of the game. But I guess what I'm advocating for is just a reversion of what they did in Kalandra, which is just pure cope, right? But yeah, that kind of sums up all of my thoughts on the league. I think it was a fun one. Titanic Exiles are pretty fucking crazy. We'll kind of see that, you know, what happens after they nerf this shit. Yeah, I had a fun league. It's always fun to get together with the boys. I'll be playing the Dark Tide update for the next couple weeks. I'm excited about the new class. I'm a big Dark Tide player, so looking forward to that. So again, if you have any questions about any of the strategies, anything like that, any of the builds, I try and answer you the best I can, unless it's a question I've answered literally 100 times. So please look in the comments, maybe if you have a question answered already. Once again, I'm Snap, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, guys.